Okay, I know how this looks. This is kind of funny. This really is. This video right here is one that I did not think we would be making at any point in the 2022-2023 season, but it's been about 15% of the year so far, and yeah, we're here. Let's talk about the Toronto Maple Leafs, let's talk about the Edmonton Oilers, and the idea of a trade between the two teams involving goaltender Jack Campbell. And I can't even say that with a straight face, but here are a few tweets going over the situation that kind of summarize everything up to this point. Remember when Kyle Dubas lowballed Jack Campbell because he didn't think he was a $5 million goalie, and Campbell left the Leafs on bad terms just to find out he's not a $5 million goalie? Seems wild to me seeing reports of Jack being insulted about what the Leafs offered and believing he was a 5x5 goalie, and he goes to a contender, gets his bag, and is playing behind two top 5 players in the sport, and he can't figure it out. Edmonton is going to turn on him quick. Now, this tweet by Noah that did go sort of viral is summarizing Jack Campbell's unfortunate start to his Oilers career. The Oilers, at the time of recording this very piece of audio, are playing the Tampa Bay Lightning right now. Jack Campbell has made 8 saves on 8 shots, but before this game ends up concluding, these are what the numbers are at thus far. 8 games played, excluding the Tampa Bay game, of course, a .420 save percentage and an .874 goals against. He's at a 5-3-0 record. He also has been on record as to calling his own tenure with the Oilers so far pathetic. That's a very strong word to use, Jack Campbell. And this isn't really something that I think a lot of people would be too surprised about. We always kind of knew that Campbell was really hard on himself, like overtly, unnecessarily hard on himself when he ends up having a bad game or a bad night or whatever, but still, the numbers, the save percentage, the GAA heading into the Tampa Bay game yesterday, not great. You don't want to see any goaltender having a .420 goals against average in a span of 8 games, especially if that guy is supposed to be your starter. Which is why, if you take a look at where Campbell had come from, the Toronto Maple Leafs, and you see their entire conundrum with goaltending right now, you have Ilya Samsonov, he's out. You have Matt Murray, he's out. Eric Källgren's over here. You have Keith Petruzzelli, who had himself a contract signed because he was called up from the AHL's Toronto Marlies. The Oilers kind of need goaltenders, and as a result, you have yourselves articles getting published on places like Daily Faceoff, for example, saying, hey, here are a few goalies that the Maple Leafs could go out there and maybe trade for. This is why I wanted to talk about this article published on The Hockey Writers by Jim Parsons. Potential trade ideas to send Jack Campbell back to the Maple Leafs. Now, to be very clear, Parsons does start out the article by saying they don't believe the Oilers should try to trade Jack Campbell. There are multiple reasons doing so is a terrible idea, but after a rough start to the season and his career with the Oilers franchise, plus the unfortunate injury situation in Toronto where that team badly needs a goalie, it would make sense that some fans in Toronto might be calling for Campbell to come back home. Linked in this little segment is a tweet from Curtis from Alberta that had 200 likes. It sort of went viral. You're such a good person. I know you had to test the market, but it's time you come home because the orange isn't working for you. Soup, I miss you, buddy. And you could see the man cave there. Yeah, he's got Wendell Clark, Matthews, Potvin, and then there's Campbell on the TV screen. The guy who tweeted this wants Campbell to go back to Toronto. This is why the article on The Hockey Writers was even written about in the first place. It just introduces the idea, hey, Campbell said he's been pathetic, the Leafs lost out on Samsonov and Murray, and the bridge may potentially be burned in Toronto, but if there's any doubt about Campbell's future in Edmonton, and the team is feeling good about Stuart Skinner, is it worth picking up the phone to find out what Maple Leafs GM Kyle Dubas is thinking? No, I don't really think so, but let's continue with the article either way and read what Parsons has to write. The opening paragraph in the body of the article pretty much says that, hey, the Oilers gave this guy 5x5. It is way too early to give up on Jack Campbell and his services. And even though he hasn't been all too great, it's only been 8 or 9 games. So talk about jumping to conclusions at the end of one guy's career before the career has even really began. Probably give it a little bit longer before you even start thinking about the idea of trading this guy. However, Parsons does write that Campbell is a notoriously slow starter, and he tends to pick things up around this time of the year. He's on a new team and getting used to his new surroundings. Perhaps things will turn around and he'll be just fine. Not to mention, what message does it send if you abandon ship this early? The sample size isn't nearly big enough to know if you've made a mistake just yet if you are Edmonton. Then there's the opportunity in Toronto, with both of the goalies being out for a while, and let's skip past that part. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. This is what Parsons writes when it comes to what a deal might look like. First things first, Campbell has to be willing to go back to Toronto. He's got a 10-team no-trade list, and if he's still a little bit bitter about the way things ended as a member of the Leafs, he might have no desire to return. If that's the case, then none of what comes next really matters. But if Campbell is thinking he'd be more comfortable back in Toronto and the Leafs are desperate to have him back, what might Edmonton be looking for? The first is potential blue line help, and the Maple Leafs don't really have that to give with their own injury issues on the back end. Jake Muzzin is out, as is Jordy Ben. The Leafs might want to give away a guy like Justin Hall, but who knows if the Oilers would actually want somebody like that. That leaves forwards, and Edmonton has some middle six guys who are struggling. Would Dubas be willing to move Alex Kerfoot? It's always Kerfoot. He's always the guy getting thrown into these articles, because of course he is. So yeah, Kerfoot or David Kampf for a guy like Jack Campbell, and I mean, yeah, Parsons says at the end he's not a fan of Campbell getting traded from Edmonton, and it's too soon to give up on the player, especially since it leaves the Oilers without a backup. But any GM should be doing their job and looking at all options. If nothing else, Ken Holland should be calling Dubas just to see what he needs or wants. Okay, so a link will be in the description if you want to go ahead and read this article. I cut out a lot of extra stuff. There's a lot of meat on the bone here. Don't worry, Parsons goes out there and dives into it pretty deeply, I feel. But a Jack Campbell trade back to Toronto? Oh boy. Color me surprised when I saw this article pop up on my timeline, and the fact that people are actually satirically making tweets about it too. Here's a tweet made by Steven. It talks about how it took 102 days for fans to go from talking about how Campbell is going to be the final piece of a Stanley Cup puzzle with the Oilers to this article that we had just looked at, potential trade ideas to send Campbell back to the Maple Leafs. And yeah, this tweet went viral as well. Everybody's talking about Jack Campbell and his poor start to the season, so I guess this kind of feeds into the reactionary nature of NHL fans and hockey fans in general, because things really do change quickly. I mean, Jack Campbell having a month where he puts up, let's say, a .925 save percentage, that's not really the most surprising thing in the world to me. If he goes out there and he does that this upcoming month of November, for example, I wouldn't really be too surprised. Like, to be honest, he is good enough to be able to bounce back and hopefully not let the bad start affect him that much. We know that when Campbell gets in his head, which it appears that he is based off the comments that he made about how he's pathetic, he plays a lot worse. So hopefully if he continues making saves in this Tampa Bay game that's going on right now as I'm recording this audio, he's able to carry on that momentum towards the rest of the month and show the Oilers why they signed him to a 5x5, because if he continues playing as poorly as he had been to start off the year, I don't think anybody's going to be saying, hey, the guy needs to go back to Toronto anytime soon. But, of course, there are other articles published, as we had said, on different platforms suggesting different goaltenders over to the Maple Leafs in this dire time of goaltending need. So you can let me know in the comments all your thoughts about who Toronto should be targeting, if they should be targeting anybody. I mean, if you're really comfortable and confident in a guy like Keith Petruzzelli, then hey, be my guest. He was a really good AHL and NCAA goaltender, so I wouldn't be too surprised if anybody's going out there saying that he should be okay in this role. But if it's a goaltender trade, who's on your mind? Is it Jonathan Quick, Vejmelka? Is it that Jack Campbell that we had just spent 8 minutes talking about? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as well. If you're an Oilers fan and anybody was trying to propose a Jack Campbell trade, what would you want in return? 5x5 is pretty committed, and you did shell that money out for Jack Campbell, so if you're getting rid of a guy that's committed for that amount of time and you need to get yourselves another goaltender to fill in that spot, who do you go for and what exactly is the return there on a Campbell trade? Talk to the comments, your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this Juraj 99. And bye.